Have you ever felt so desperate, so wronged, that you'd consider the unthinkable to achieve justice? In a society that gave her no power, one woman named Tamar faced an impossible choice: fade into obscurity, or enact a daring, high-stakes deception to claim what was rightfully hers. Her audacious gamble in Genesis 38 didn't just save her own destiny. It preserved the very line from which salvation would come. Discover the gripping true story of a woman who risked everything to make history. Imagine a story of audacious defiance buried deep within ancient texts. A story whispered rather than shouted. A story that unfolds quietly between family tents and dusty roads, yet carries consequences that ripple far beyond its moment. Tonight we enter that ancient world gently and unhurriedly, allowing its details to settle softly in the mind. Before we begin, let me welcome you warmly. Wherever you are listening from, take a moment to notice your surroundings. Perhaps it is evening, perhaps very late at night, or maybe early morning where you are. I would love for you to share in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. If you find these stories comforting or meaningful, please like, subscribe, share this with someone who might enjoy it, and explore the playlist linked in the description below. Each story is crafted to be calm, thoughtful, and immersive. Now let us step quietly into the world of Judah and Tamar. Judah was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, a man shaped by family tension, long journeys, and complicated choices. He grew up among brothers whose lives were deeply intertwined, sometimes with loyalty, sometimes with rivalry. Judah himself had already played a pivotal role in the selling of his brother Joseph, choosing profit over bloodshed, a decision that would linger in his character like an unresolved question. By the time we meet him again in this chapter of Genesis, Judah has separated from his brothers and settled among the Canaanites. Judah took a wife from the region, the daughter of a man named Shua. With her he had 3 sons. The first was named Er, the second Onan, and the third Shelah. These names appear briefly in the text, yet their presence sets the foundation for everything that follows. Judah arranged a marriage for his firstborn Er, choosing a woman named Tamar. Scripture does not tell us her background, her parents, or her homeland. What it does tell us is that she enters Judah's family as a wife, carrying with her the hope of continuity, security, and future life through children. But the story immediately darkens. Er, Judah's firstborn, is described in Genesis as wicked in the sight of the Lord. The text offers no details of his wrongdoing, only the result. The Lord put him to death. Tamar is left a widow, childless, and vulnerable. In the ancient world, this was not merely a personal tragedy. It was a social and economic crisis. A woman without a husband or son had no secure place, no inheritance, and no clear future. Within that world existed a deeply rooted expectation, one that would later be written into Israel's law, but already lived within its customs. When a man died without leaving a son, his brother was expected to take the widow as his wife and raise up offspring in the dead brother's name. This was not a romantic arrangement. It was an act of duty and justice, meant to preserve the family line and protect the widow from abandonment. Through this custom, Tamar still had hope. Judah instructed his second son Onan to fulfill this responsibility. Onan entered the marriage knowing exactly what was expected of him. He knew that any child born from Tamar would not be counted as his own, but as Er's heir. Scripture tells us that Onan deliberately refused to fulfill his obligation. ensuring that Tamar would not conceive. His actions were calculated and selfish, aimed at preserving his own inheritance while appearing outwardly obedient. This too was seen as evil in the sight of the Lord. Onan, like his brother, was put to death. Now Tamar stands twice widowed, still without a child, and entirely dependent on Judah's next decision. Judah had a third son, Shelah, still young. According to custom, Tamar should have remained under Judah's protection until Shelah came of age, at which time he would marry her and secure her future. Judah spoke the right words. He told Tamar to return to her father's house and wait until Shelah was grown. On the surface, this seems reasonable and even kind, but beneath those words lay fear and avoidance. Judah had lost 2 sons, both after marrying Tamar. Whether he consciously blamed her or simply feared another loss, the result was the same. Judah did not intend to give Shelah to Tamar. Scripture makes this clear. Tamar was sent away with a promise that Judah did not plan to keep. This is the betrayal that sets everything in motion. Tamar returned to her father's house, but her status did not change. She was not free to remarry, because she was still considered part of Judah's household. She was not provided for as a daughter-in-law should have been. She was suspended in waiting, neither released nor fulfilled, her life placed on pause by a decision that favored Judah's comfort over her survival. Time passed. Judah's wife died. Shelah grew up, and still Tamar remained alone. Judah continued his life, traveling, conducting business, participating in the rhythms of his community. The text tells us that he went up to Timnah with his friend Hira to shear his sheep. This was a time of festivity and abundance, a season when wealth was counted and shared. Tamar heard of Judah's journey, and in that moment she understood something with painful clarity. Judah had broken his word. Shelah was grown, and she had not been given to him. This realization marks the quiet turning point of the story. Tamar recognizes that if she remains passive, she will be forgotten entirely. No son will carry her name forward. No place will be made for her in Judah's household. She has obeyed, waited, and trusted, and she has been betrayed. Yet at this stage of the story, Tamar does nothing outwardly dramatic. What we see instead is a slow gathering of resolve. She understands the system she lives in. She understands its rules and its failures. And she understands that Judah himself stands at the center of both her injustice and her only remaining hope. This chapter does not end with action, but with tension, a promise made and broken, a woman waiting beyond the boundaries of fairness, a patriarch moving freely while responsibility lingers behind him unresolved. The calm of the narrative hides the weight of what is at stake. Lineage, justice, survival, and truth are all quietly suspended in the balance. Judah's betrayal is not loud or cruel in obvious ways. It is subtle, wrapped in delay and silence. It is the kind of wrongdoing that often goes unnoticed, especially when the vulnerable are expected to endure quietly. But the ancient text does not forget. It slows down here, inviting us to notice what has been ignored. And so the stage is set. Tamar stands at the edge of erasure, armed not with power or status, but with awareness. Judah continues on his path, unaware that the choices he has made, and the promise he has broken, are about to confront him in a way he never expected. The night grows still over these ancient hills, and the story moves forward, carrying with it the quiet insistence that justice, once delayed, will eventually seek its voice. Judah's life, though briefly sketched in the text, unfolds within a tightly woven family structure that shapes every decision he makes. He is not an isolated figure acting on impulse alone. He is a son of Jacob, grandson of Isaac, and great-grandson of Abraham, part of a lineage where family continuity is treated as sacred responsibility rather than personal preference. To understand what Judah does, and what he fails to do, we must linger gently within that family world and the expectations that governed it. Judah grew up in a household defined by promise and tension. Jacob's sons were many, each born to different mothers, each competing for place, blessing, and survival. Birth order mattered deeply. The firstborn carried authority and inheritance. Younger sons lived in the shadow of those ahead of them. Judah, though not the eldest, learned early that leadership was not merely inherited but claimed through action. This understanding would later surface in moments of courage and confession, but at this stage of the story it remains incomplete. When Judah left his brothers and settled among the Canaanites, he did not abandon the values of his ancestry. He married, established a household, and sought to secure his line through sons. His 3 children represented stability, future, and honor. In the ancient Near Eastern world, a man's legacy was not measured by possessions alone, but by the continuation of his name through generations. To lose a son without heir was to lose a portion of oneself. This is why marriage was never merely personal. It was communal, legal, and deeply spiritual. A wife entered her husband's family fully, her identity reshaped around his lineage. Tamar, when she married Er, became part of Judah's household in a binding way. Her fate was now tied to theirs. Her ability to bear a son was not simply about motherhood, but about preserving the family name entrusted to her. When Er died, the responsibility to protect Tamar and preserve Er's lineage did not disappear. It shifted. This is where the cultural expectation, often referred to as Levirate marriage, comes into view. Though the formal law would later be articulated in Deuteronomy, the practice itself was ancient, widely understood, and morally binding long before it was written. The principle was simple yet profound. If a man died without a son, his brother was expected to take the widow and produce offspring on behalf of the deceased. The first son born from that union would legally belong to the dead brother, ensuring his name did not vanish from the community. This practice served several purposes at once. It protected the widow from abandonment, preserved family inheritance, and maintained social order. Importantly, this was not optional. Refusal carried shame, and later, explicit public consequences. Even before codification, the expectation was deeply ingrained. To neglect this duty was to act against justice itself. Judah understood this. His instruction to Onan was not unusual or controversial. It was expected. Onan's refusal, therefore, was not merely personal disobedience, but a deliberate violation of communal responsibility. He benefited from the appearance of compliance, while actively undermining the purpose of the act. By doing so, he exploited Tamar's vulnerability and threatened the stability of his brother's line. After Onan's death, the responsibility fell again, this time onto Judah himself. If Shelah was too young, Judah became Tamar's guardian. He stood in place of the family authority responsible for her future. Sending her back to her father's house was not inherently wrong if it was temporary and honest. But it carried an unspoken condition. Tamar's life remained on hold. She could not remarry freely. She could not form a new household. Her only path forward remained tied to Judah's promise. Within this framework, Judah's failure becomes clearer and heavier. He does not openly reject the custom. He does not deny its legitimacy. Instead, he delays. He allows time to pass without resolution. This quiet neglect is more damaging than outright refusal, because it traps Tamar in uncertainty while shielding Judah from public accountability. Judah's family, like many patriarchal households of the time, functioned on trust and spoken word. Promises carried weight because there was little external enforcement. Honor was maintained through reputation and memory. Judah's assurance to Tamar should have been sufficient. That it was not fulfilled reveals a fracture between social expectation and personal fear. Fear plays a significant role here. Judah has buried two sons. Whether he understands their deaths as divine judgment or tragic coincidence, the result is the same. He becomes cautious, protective of what remains. Shelah represents his last link to the future. Giving him to Tamar feels risky. Yet this fear does not excuse the abandonment of duty. The ancient text does not frame Judah as ignorant. It frames him as hesitant, conflicted, and ultimately unjust. Tamar, meanwhile, exists fully within this cultural system. She does not challenge the legitimacy of Levirate marriage. She depends on it. Her hope is rooted in the belief that the family structure will function as intended. Her waiting is not passive submission, but faithful endurance within the rules she has been given. This context matters deeply, because it reframes what is often misunderstood about Tamar's later actions. She is not rebelling against tradition. She is insisting upon it. She is not seeking personal pleasure or scandal. She is seeking justice promised to her by custom, by family, and by Judah himself. Judah's household, therefore, becomes a place of contradiction. Outwardly, it reflects accepted norms. Inwardly, it fails to uphold them. Tamar's isolation is not the result of lawlessness, but of selective obedience. The system that should have protected her has been bent by fear and convenience. The cultural expectation of Levirate marriage was designed to prevent exactly this situation. It existed because communities understood how easily widows could be erased. Tamar's story exposes what happens when that expectation is acknowledged in theory but ignored in practice. As time passes and Shelah reaches maturity, the silence grows louder. Judah does not call for Tamar. No messenger arrives. No preparation is made. The absence of action speaks clearly. Judah has chosen preservation of his remaining son over the preservation of justice. Within the calm rhythm of the narrative, This realization settles slowly but firmly. Tamar is not forgotten by accident. She is set aside by choice. Judah's family continues its routines while she remains suspended, her future quietly withheld. This segment of the story does not rush toward resolution. It invites reflection. It asks us to consider how deeply embedded expectations can still be violated without confrontation. It shows how injustice often survives not through dramatic cruelty, but through delay, fear, and silence. And it leaves us here, at a moment of full understanding. The rules are known. The obligations are clear. The failure is undeniable. Tamar now sees her position with clarity shaped by patience and time. Judah, whether he admits it or not, stands in breach of a sacred duty. The story continues forward from this understanding, carrying with it the weight of an expectation unmet and the quiet resolve of a woman who knows that waiting any longer will only deepen the wrong already done. The moment Shelah reached maturity marked the point at which waiting could no longer be mistaken for circumstance. Childhood had passed. Time had done its work. The reason Judah once gave for delay no longer existed. In the quiet logic of the ancient household, the obligation should now move forward without hesitation. Tamar's position was clear. The promise Judah had spoken now stood exposed to the measure of action. Yet nothing happened. No message came from Judah's household. No arrangement was discussed. No acknowledgment was made. The silence was not neutral. It was decisive. By allowing Shelah to grow to manhood without fulfilling his word, Judah crossed from hesitation into betrayal. This failure was immediate in its impact, even if it appeared slow in its unfolding. Tamar was no longer waiting for a future event. That future had arrived and passed her by. Judah's inaction functioned as a denial without the courage of speech. He neither released her nor provided for her. He simply allowed her to remain unseen. In the ancient world, such neglect carried real consequences. Tamar remained legally bound to Judah's family, yet practically excluded from it. She was still considered a widow of the house, which meant she could not pursue another marriage without dishonor. At the same time, she received none of the protection or provision that should have accompanied that status. Her life existed in a narrow space where duty had been claimed over her, but not exercised on her behalf. Judah's choice was not made in ignorance. He understood exactly what Shelah's maturity meant. He had lived within these customs his entire life. The text gives no suggestion that he misunderstood his responsibility. Instead, it reveals a man who chose avoidance. Fear had hardened into decision. He had resolved, quietly and firmly, that Tamar would never become Shelah's wife. This is the betrayal at the heart of the story. Not a sudden act of cruelty, but a deliberate withholding of justice. Judah protected his last son by sacrificing the future of a woman who had already lost everything under his roof. The cost of his fear was not carried by him. It was carried by Tamar. Scripture does not record Judah explaining his reasoning, because the outcome speaks loudly enough. Tamar remained alone. The family line of heir remained unfulfilled. The very purpose of Levirate responsibility was undone. Judah's household continued forward as if nothing were amiss, while a widow remained suspended in forced loyalty. The betrayal becomes sharper when viewed through Judah's authority. As patriarch, his word held power. Tamar had trusted that word. Her obedience was complete. She returned to her father's house. She waited. She did not protest. She did not seek another solution. Her restraint highlights the weight of Judah's failure. The longer she waited, the clearer it became that the delay was intentional. Time in the narrative moves quietly here, but its effect is unmistakable. Seasons pass. Daily life continues. Judah's affairs prosper enough for him to travel, to engage in business, to participate in communal celebrations. His household functions. Shelah lives freely, unaffected by the obligation he never fulfills. Tamar, however, remains fixed in place. This imbalance is not accidental. It reflects the unequal cost of Judah's decision. The system that should have safeguarded the vulnerable instead amplifies their vulnerability when those in power choose convenience over faithfulness. Judah's silence becomes a form of control. By saying nothing, he keeps Tamar bound without giving her what she is owed. The betrayal is also immediate in another sense. Once Shelah is grown, Judah's original statement is proven false. What was framed as temporary protection is revealed as permanent exclusion. Tamar is no longer simply waiting. She has been misled. The trust she placed in Judah's word is broken, and with it, the assumption that patience alone will lead to justice. This moment does not erupt in confrontation. There is no recorded argument, no public accusation. The story remains calm on the surface, but beneath it, a profound wrong has been completed. Judah has failed not only Tamar, but the very values his family claims to uphold. He has allowed fear to override obligation, and silence to replace righteousness. From this point forward, Tamar's situation cannot be resolved by endurance alone. The path laid before her has reached a dead end. Judah's household will not act unless compelled. The promise once offered as assurance now stands as evidence of betrayal. The narrative lingers here deliberately, allowing the weight of this failure to settle. Nothing dramatic interrupts the stillness, and yet everything has changed. Tamar now understands that justice will not arrive on its own. Judah has chosen preservation of comfort over fulfillment of duty. The responsibility he carried has been laid down, leaving its burden entirely on her. This betrayal does not close the story. It opens it. It creates the condition in which all that follows becomes necessary. But for now, the text remains steady and restrained, holding us in the quiet space where a wrong has been fully realized, and where the cost of inaction has finally come due. With Judah's choice now fixed and unmistakable, Tamar's reality narrows sharply. The space she occupies in society becomes smaller with every passing day, defined less by who she is and more by what she lacks. She is a widow without a child, a woman bound to a household that no longer claims her, and a life paused in a world that does not wait gently. In the ancient society she inhabits, a woman's security is inseparable from lineage. To belong is to be named through a husband or a son. Tamar has neither. Her first marriage ended in death. Her second chance was denied, and the third path that should have opened has been quietly closed. Without a son, she carries no future within Judah's family. Without release, she carries no future outside it. This is not merely emotional loss. It is material and social destitution. A widow without provision relies on charity, often returning to her father's house not as a daughter with promise, but as a burden with no prospect of resolution. Over time, even that refuge can wear thin. Families measure survival carefully. Resources are finite. A woman whose future is unresolved becomes increasingly vulnerable to neglect and resentment. Tamar's position also exposes her to public suspicion. A childless widow, lingering year after year, invites whispered questions. In a culture that often interprets misfortune as moral failure, her losses could easily be misread as personal fault. 2 husbands dead. No children. No resolution. Silence becomes a breeding ground for judgment. Even when blame is undeserved, it settles easily on those without protection. Her loss of lineage deepens the wound. In the world of Genesis, to be remembered is to live on through descendants. To die without offspring is to fade from communal memory. Tamar understands this deeply. She knows that if Er's line ends with her, his name disappears. What was entrusted to her at marriage is slipping away, not through her failure, but through Judah's refusal. This awareness presses on her quietly and relentlessly. Tamar is not depicted as impulsive or reckless. Her desperation is not loud. It is measured, thoughtful, and shaped by time. She has waited. She has obeyed. She has allowed every socially acceptable avenue to close before her. Only now does the full weight of her situation become unavoidable. Ostracization looms close. A woman who remains unattached and childless is easily marginalized. Invitations cease. Voices soften or disappear altogether. Tamar exists on the edges of gatherings, of conversations, of concern. She is neither fully included nor fully dismissed. She lingers in an uncomfortable in-between space where her presence reminds others of unresolved responsibility. This is what makes her situation desperate, not because she lacks intelligence or agency, but because the system around her has failed to respond. Every legitimate path has been blocked by silence. The man with authority to resolve her future has chosen not to act. The structures meant to protect her instead confine her. Tamar's desperation is therefore not rooted in impatience, but in clarity. She sees now that time alone will not correct the injustice done to her. Judah's fear has become policy. His inaction has settled into permanence. If she remains passive, her life will dissolve quietly, her name and heirs erased without protest. Yet even in this narrowing of options, Tamar does not abandon the values she has lived by. She does not seek revenge. She does not aim to disgrace Judah publicly for the sake of humiliation. Her concern remains focused and precise. She seeks what was promised. She seeks lineage preserved. She seeks justice within the very framework that has failed her. Her desperation sharpens her perception. She observes Judah's movements. She understands the rhythms of his life. She knows the customs surrounding travel, celebration, and seasonal gatherings. She recognizes moments when boundaries soften and opportunities arise. Her awareness is patient, not frantic. It is born from necessity, not impulse. This is the quiet strength of Tamar's desperation. It does not break her into despair. It steadies her into resolve. She stands at the edge of erasure and refuses to step quietly into it. Her situation has stripped away every illusion. What remains is a clear understanding that survival, dignity, and justice are now inseparable. The text does not rush this moment. It allows us to sit with Tamar in her isolation. It allows us to feel the slow pressure of a life constrained by choices made by others. Her desperation is not dramatic spectacle. It is the lived reality of a woman whose obedience has been met with betrayal, and whose future has been withheld without explanation. In this stillness, Tamar's inner world shifts. The question is no longer whether Judah will act. That question has been answered. The question now is whether she will allow the injustice to define the end of her story. The weight of societal exclusion, the threat of being forgotten, and the loss of lineage converge into a single understanding. Something must be done. Not yet in action, but in intention, Tamar crosses a threshold. Her desperation does not drive her away from righteousness. It drives her toward it, demanding that justice be claimed when it is no longer given. The story continues forward from this point, shaped by the quiet resolve of a woman who refuses to vanish simply because others have chosen silence. With her resolve now settled inwardly, Tamar turns her attention to the world around her with new precision. She does not act in haste. Every part of what she is about to do is shaped by careful observation and deep understanding of the customs that govern Judah's life. Her plan does not emerge from recklessness, but from insight into the very structures that have failed her. Judah's movements are known within the community. News travels easily along familiar routes, especially during seasons of activity and celebration. Tamar learns that Judah is going up to Timnah to oversee the shearing of his sheep. This detail matters more than it might first appear. Sheep shearing was not a private errand. It was a festive occasion, often accompanied by feasting, relaxed boundaries, and increased travel. Men gathered, transactions were made, and the atmosphere was looser than during ordinary days. Tamar understands that this setting creates opportunity. Judah will be away from his household, away from the familiar markers of authority and reputation that shape his daily behavior. He will be passing along public roads, entering towns, interacting with strangers. The rigid structures that have confined Tamar do not dissolve entirely in such moments, but they bend. She also understands the social reality of women positioned along these routes. Certain women were known to sit near entrances to towns, places where travelers paused and decisions were made quickly. These women were not necessarily what later generations would imagine. The text itself uses language that reflects appearance and assumption rather than confirmed profession. What matters is perception. Tamar intends to be seen in a way that alters how Judah interprets her presence. Her plan requires concealment. She removes the garments of her widowhood. These clothes have marked her as bound, waiting, and inactive. By setting them aside, she symbolically steps out of the role that Judah has trapped her within. She covers herself with a veil, not to disappear entirely, but to obscure her identity. This is not an attempt to deceive the world indiscriminately. It is a targeted concealment directed at one man who has failed to recognize her without it. Tamar positions herself at the entrance to Enaim, on the road to Timnah. This location is deliberate. It is visible enough to be noticed, yet ambiguous enough to invite assumption. She does not chase Judah. She does not seek him out directly. She places herself where his path will intersect with hers naturally, allowing his own choices to lead him toward her. The risk she takes here is immense. If recognized, she could be accused of dishonor. If misunderstood, she could face severe consequences. A woman acting outside prescribed boundaries was easily condemned, especially one already vulnerable. Tamar is fully aware of this. Her courage is not blind. It is measured against the certainty that doing nothing will lead to quiet erasure. Judah sees her and does not recognize her. The veil accomplishes its purpose. He assumes she is a harlot, not because she declares herself to be one, but because of where she sits and how she is presented. This assumption arises from Judah, not from Tamar's words. The text is careful here. Tamar does not speak falsely about her identity. She allows Judah to project his own conclusions. Judah approaches her. His actions are unguarded, shaped by impulse and context. He proposes to lie with her, offering payment in the form of a young goat from his flock. Tamar does not refuse. She engages him calmly, but she does not allow the encounter to proceed without security. She asks for a pledge until the payment is sent. This moment reveals the depth of her planning. Tamar understands transactional norms. She knows that promises without collateral have already failed her once. This time, she insists on tangible assurance. Judah agrees, offering items that uniquely identify him: his signet, his cord, and his staff. These are not trivial objects. The signet represents authority and identity. The cord secures it. The staff functions as both support and symbol of status. Together, they unmistakably belong to Judah. By accepting these items, Tamar ensures that the encounter cannot be denied. She does not seek exposure for its own sake. She seeks accountability. The pledge transforms a private act into one bound to truth. Judah leaves these markers of himself in her possession, unaware of the weight they will later carry. The encounter itself is described without embellishment. The text does not linger on it. What matters is the outcome. Tamar conceives. This single fact alters everything. What Judah withheld through silence is now claimed through action. The lineage that was allowed to wither now begins anew, not through Judah's compliance, but through Tamar's determination. Afterward, Tamar does not remain in disguise. She rises, departs, and removes the veil. She puts back on the garments of her widowhood. She returns to her previous place, outwardly unchanged. This detail is crucial. She does not abandon her identity. She resumes it. The disguise was a means, not a transformation. Her intention was never to escape her role, but to fulfill it. Judah later sends the young goat by the hand of his friend Hira to retrieve the pledge. The woman cannot be found. The people of the place say there was no harlot there. Judah accepts the loss of his items rather than risk public embarrassment. He chooses silence once again, unaware that the objects he has relinquished are now held by the very person he sought to avoid. Tamar's plan, daring as it is, remains contained within her understanding of justice. She does not expose Judah immediately. She does not seek to shame him publicly at this stage. She waits. Her action has shifted the balance, but she allows events to unfold further before truth is revealed. This calculated risk carries Tamar beyond desperation into agency. She has acted within the world as it is, not as it should have been. Her plan does not overthrow custom. It confronts hypocrisy. It does not destroy lineage. It restores it. The path she has chosen is narrow, dangerous, and precise, shaped by necessity and courage rather than desire. The story continues with this tension held quietly in place. Judah believes the matter finished. Tamar carries within her the evidence of life and truth. Nothing has been resolved yet, but the conditions have changed irrevocably. Time now becomes an ally to truth, though neither Judah nor Tamar speaks of it openly. What Tamar carries is not only life within her, but certainty in her possession. The items Judah left behind are quiet witnesses, resting unseen yet powerful, waiting for the moment when words alone will no longer suffice. The staff, the signet, and the cord are not ordinary objects. Each one carries meaning far beyond its material form. Together, they form an unmistakable signature of identity, authority, and responsibility. Tamar understands this fully. Her request for these items was not accidental, nor was it excessive. It was precise, shaped by a clear awareness of how proof functions in a world governed by memory and recognition rather than written records. The signet, often engraved with a personal mark or symbol, functions as a seal. It is how a man authenticates agreements and commands. Documents sealed with it carry his authority. To possess a man's signet is to hold evidence of his identity that cannot be replicated or denied. No other object would speak more clearly of ownership and truth. The cord that secures the signet is not a mere accessory. It binds the seal to its owner. Without it, the signet is incomplete. Together, they form a unit, instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with Judah. The cord ensures that the signet remains close to the body, a constant marker of who he is and what he represents. The staff completes the set. In that time, a staff is both practical and symbolic. It supports the traveler, marks status, and often bears distinctive features that identify its owner. Men carried their staffs openly. They were seen, remembered, and associated with the one who held them. To relinquish it, even temporarily, is to leave behind a visible extension of oneself. By asking for these three items, Tamar secures something stronger than witnesses. She secures Judah himself, bound to the truth of what has occurred. Even if he were to deny his involvement, the objects would speak without raising their voices. They do not accuse. They simply exist. Judah's willingness to hand them over reveals his lack of foresight. He does not consider the weight of what he gives away. His concern at that moment is transactional, not reflective. He sees the pledge as temporary, a formality until payment is delivered. Tamar sees it as permanence, a safeguard against denial. When Judah later attempts to retrieve the pledge, the failure to do so deepens the significance of the collateral. His friend searches openly, asking after the woman Judah believes he encountered. The response is simple and unambiguous. There was no harlot there. The denial does not expose Tamar. It protects her. The ambiguity that once concealed her now shields her again. Judah chooses not to pursue the matter further. His concern for reputation outweighs his interest in recovering the objects. This decision seals his vulnerability. By accepting loss in silence, he unwittingly confirms the power of what he has surrendered. The staff, the signet, and the cord remain with Tamar, unclaimed and uncontested. For Tamar, these items are not trophies. She does not display them. She does not use them to threaten or manipulate. She keeps them quietly, understanding that their strength lies in restraint. Proof revealed too early can be dismissed. Proof revealed at the necessary moment cannot be undone. Her genius lies in this restraint. She anticipates not only the need for evidence, but the timing of its revelation. She understands that truth, when presented calmly and without accusation, carries greater authority than anger ever could. The objects she holds allow her to wait without fear, knowing that when the time comes, denial will not stand. As her pregnancy becomes visible, the significance of the collateral grows heavier. In a society quick to judge, Tamar's condition invites scrutiny. Without the items in her possession, her fate could turn harshly against her. Accusation would come easily. Defense would be difficult. But the staff, the signet, and the cord shift the balance. They transform her from accused to bearer of truth. These objects do not merely identify Judah. They expose the gap between his public authority and his private actions. They reveal not only participation, but responsibility. Judah's seal does not belong in Tamar's hands by chance. It arrived there through his own choice, given freely, without coercion. The brilliance of Tamar's plan rests here. She does not rely on persuasion. She does not rely on witnesses who might falter. She relies on the undeniable. The items cannot be explained away. They cannot belong to another. They cannot be dismissed as coincidence. They are Judah's, in every sense that matters. In holding them, Tamar holds more than evidence of an encounter. She holds the means by which truth will eventually surface intact. Her foresight transforms vulnerability into strength. Her silence becomes preparation. The staff, the signet, and the cord remain still, yet their presence reshapes everything that will follow, anchoring the story firmly to truth that cannot be erased. The days pass quietly, and Tamar's condition can no longer remain unseen. Life announces itself in a way that words cannot restrain. In the close-knit world surrounding Judah's household, news travels quickly, shaped by assumption before truth has any chance to speak. Tamar is brought up in conversation not as a woman wronged, but as a woman accused. Word reaches Judah with urgency and moral outrage. Tamar, his daughter-in-law, is said to be pregnant. The language used is sharp and condemning. It is not framed as a question or a concern, but as a charge. In Judah's mind, the conclusion forms swiftly. She has acted outside the bounds assigned to her. She has dishonored the family she was bound to. He does not pause to consider his own silence, his broken promise, or the long years of abandonment that led to this moment. Authority moves quickly when it feels threatened. Judah responds with severity. He orders that Tamar be brought out and burned. This reaction reveals the imbalance of power that has defined her life. The same man who withheld justice now prepares to enforce punishment. His judgment is swift, public, and uncompromising. There is no investigation. There is no listening. In his certainty, Judah believes himself righteous. Tamar is summoned. She does not resist. She does not cry out. She does not argue or plead. Her strength remains measured and calm. She allows herself to be brought forward, knowing that the moment she has prepared for has arrived. The objects she has kept in silence are now ready to speak. Before sentence is carried out, Tamar sends a message to Judah. She does not confront him in public with raised voice or accusation. Instead, she communicates with clarity and restraint. The message is simple and devastating in its precision. She sends the staff, the signet, and the cord, accompanied by words that do not accuse but invite recognition. By the man to whom these belong, she says, I am pregnant. This statement shifts everything. Tamar does not name Judah. She does not expose him through force. She places the truth directly before him and allows him to identify himself. The proof rests quietly in front of him, undeniable and complete. The objects he knows intimately now lie outside his control. Judah sees them. Recognition is immediate. There is no confusion, no delay. The staff is his. The signet is his. The cord is his. These are not items that could be mistaken. They are extensions of his identity. In that instant, the narrative turns inward. The accusation he issued outwardly collapses under the weight of truth. The power dynamic reverses without spectacle. Tamar does not speak again. She does not need to. The proof has done its work. Judah stands exposed not by public shaming, but by his own possessions. The authority he wielded moments earlier now presses upon him from within. Judah acknowledges the truth openly. His response is not defensive. He does not attempt to obscure the facts. He does not deflect blame or seek justification. He speaks plainly. "She is more righteous than I," he says, "because I did not give her to my son Shelah." This confession is brief, yet it carries immense weight. In a single sentence, Judah names his failure. He does not minimize it. He does not claim ignorance. He does not accuse Tamar of manipulation. He recognizes her righteousness in contrast to his own wrongdoing. The public judgment he pronounced against her is reversed by his own admission. This moment marks a profound transformation within Judah. Not yet the full arc of his change, but the clear beginning of it. He accepts responsibility without coercion. The man who once chose silence to avoid discomfort now chooses truth despite its cost. His authority is not stripped from him. It is refined. Judah's confession restores Tamar's dignity instantly. The threat against her life dissolves. The accusation that could have destroyed her is replaced by acknowledgement of her integrity. She is no longer the object of suspicion. She is revealed as the one who acted rightly when others failed. The drama of this revelation lies not in raised voices or spectacle, but in restraint. Tamar does not triumph outwardly. Judah does not grovel. The moment is powerful precisely because it is quiet. Truth emerges not through force, but through clarity and courage held patiently until the proper time. Judah's words also reveal understanding. He recognizes that Tamar's actions were not reckless, but necessary. By naming her righteousness, he affirms that she acted within a moral framework higher than his own fear-driven choices. He admits that his refusal to give Shelah to her created the conditions that led to this outcome. This acknowledgement reshapes the narrative entirely. Tamar is no longer seen as a transgressor of social order, but as a restorer of justice within it. Judah, once confident in his authority, now sees himself clearly. His transformation begins with honesty, a rare and costly virtue in positions of power. The staff, the signet, and the cord return to their owner, but they do not return unchanged. Their meaning has expanded. They are no longer merely symbols of Judah's status. They are reminders of a moment when truth confronted authority and was not denied. Judah does not continue relations with Tamar after this. The text makes this clear. The purpose of the encounter has been fulfilled. Tamar sought justice and lineage, not ongoing connection. Judah respects this boundary, another subtle indication of his changed posture. The power he once wielded without reflection is now tempered by humility. The community, witnessing Judah's confession, must adjust its understanding. The public accusation has been publicly overturned. Tamar stands vindicated. Judah stands accountable. The reversal is complete and undeniable. This unmasking does not humiliate Judah for the sake of humiliation. It invites transformation. His words mark the first time in the narrative that he fully owns the consequences of his choices. The man who once proposed selling his brother now acknowledges wrongdoing without negotiation. Tamar remains largely silent throughout this revelation, yet her presence fills the space. Her calm, her timing, and her restraint define the moment. She does not seek control. She seeks truth, and when truth arrives, she allows it to stand on its own. The revelation does not conclude the story. It reorients it. Judah's transformation begins here, grounded in confession rather than denial. Tamar's courage is affirmed without spectacle. Justice, long delayed, arrives without excess. The night around this moment is still. The weight of what has Judah's confession does not emerge as a rehearsed statement or a reluctant admission drawn out by pressure. It rises immediately from recognition. The instant his eyes rest on the staff, the signet, and the cord, something within him settles into certainty. There is no room left for denial, no space for alternative explanations. The truth aligns too perfectly with his own memory. What makes this moment remarkable is not only that Judah recognizes the objects, but that he recognizes himself within them. These items represent his authority, his identity, and his standing within the community. To see them separated from him and returned through Tamar's message forces him to confront the gap between who he appears to be and who he has been. His realization is layered. He understands first the physical truth of what has happened. He understands second the moral truth that follows from it. Tamar did not act in secrecy. She acted within the constraints he created. The responsibility he avoided has returned to him, now undeniable. Judah does not ask questions. He does not demand clarification. He does not call for further witnesses. The proof requires none. His realization is complete before his words are spoken. When he speaks, he does so with clarity that carries weight precisely because it is unembellished. She is more righteous than I. This statement is not defensive. It does not attempt to preserve his reputation by narrowing the scope of his fault. He does not say that circumstances were complicated or that intentions were misunderstood. He places moral clarity above personal status. In doing so, he elevates Tamar publicly and lowers himself willingly. The word righteous here is not casual. In the world Judah inhabits, righteousness is tied to faithfulness, justice, and alignment with what is right before God and community. By using this word, Judah declares that Tamar's actions upheld justice where his did not. He acknowledges that righteousness is measured by action, not position. His confession also identifies the precise nature of his failure. He names it directly. I did not give her to my son Shelah. This is not a vague apology. It is a specific acknowledgement of broken obligation. He does not blame fear. He does not blame circumstance. He states the truth plainly. He failed to do what was required of him. This specificity matters. It reveals that Judah understands the full scope of his wrongdoing. He recognizes that Tamar's situation did not arise from chance or misfortune, but from his deliberate decision to withhold what was owed. His confession restores moral order by naming the breach clearly. The immediacy of Judah's confession also speaks to an inner shift already underway. This is not the first moment in his life when he faces the consequences of choice. Years earlier, he had participated in the selling of Joseph. At that time, he avoided bloodshed but embraced profit and silence. That choice, too, had consequences that followed him. Here, faced with another moment of moral reckoning, he chooses differently. Judah does not attempt to reclaim authority through punishment or control. He relinquishes judgment. The sentence he had issued against Tamar is undone by his own words. Authority, once misused, is now submitted to truth. This reversal does not diminish him. It reshapes him. The confession also protects Tamar completely. By declaring her more righteous, Judah removes any lingering doubt about her integrity. He affirms that her actions were not driven by immorality, but by justice. In a society quick to condemn women without protection, this public acknowledgement restores her standing fully. There is restraint even in Judah's humility. He does not exaggerate his repentance. He does not dramatize his shame. His words are few, but they are sufficient. They carry the quiet force of a man who understands that truth does not need decoration. This moment stands as a hinge in Judah's life. The man who once deferred responsibility now claims it openly. The man who once avoided confrontation now speaks it himself. His confession does not erase past failure, but it interrupts its pattern. The simplicity of his words allows them to endure. They do not belong only to this moment. They echo forward through Judah's story, shaping how he will later act when faced with other moral tests. The willingness to name truth here prepares him for courage later. Tamar does not respond verbally to Judah's confession. She does not need to. Her silence does not indicate submission. It reflects completion. The truth she safeguarded has been spoken. The justice she sought has been acknowledged. Her role in this moment is fulfilled through restraint, not assertion. The community, listening, absorbs the weight of Judah's words. A patriarch has declared himself in the wrong. A woman once accused stands affirmed. The order of things has been corrected not through force, but through confession. Judah's realization does not end the story. It grounds it. From this point, nothing can return to what it was before. The confession settles into the narrative like a stone placed carefully into a foundation. It does not draw attention to itself, but it supports everything that will follow. In this stillness, truth rests where it belongs, and righteousness is recognized not by power, but by faithfulness lived under pressure. Judah's confession does not stand alone as an isolated moment of honesty. It marks the beginning of a deep and lasting change within him, a shift that quietly reshapes his understanding of authority, responsibility, and righteousness. The words he speaks are brief, but the transformation they reveal is expansive, touching every layer of his character. Until this moment, Judah's life has been shaped by avoidance more than courage. He has shown flashes of leadership, moments of initiative, but these have often been tempered by self-preservation. When Joseph's fate hung in the balance years earlier, Judah chose profit over protection, sparing his brother's life but still allowing injustice to proceed. In Tamar's case, he chose silence over fulfillment of duty, fear over faithfulness. Each time, he acted in ways that minimized immediate risk to himself while shifting the cost onto others. What happens here is different. Judah does not merely acknowledge a factual error. He recognizes a moral imbalance and names it without qualification. By declaring Tamar more righteous than himself, he accepts a reversal that would have been unthinkable to many men of his standing. Patriarchs were not expected to compare themselves unfavorably to women, especially women who lived on the margins of their households. Yet Judah does exactly that, not under coercion, but by conviction. This recognition signals a profound internal realignment. Judah begins to see righteousness not as a matter of status or role, but as faithfulness to responsibility. Tamar, though powerless by social standards, has acted with integrity within the framework she was given. Judah, though powerful, failed to act when action was required. By acknowledging this, he reframes moral authority as something earned through obedience to justice rather than inherited through position. His response also reveals a growing awareness of how his choices affect others. Earlier in his life, Judah's decisions often centered on outcomes that protected himself or his immediate interests. Here, he allows himself to fully see the harm his inaction caused Tamar. He does not dismiss it as unintended consequence. He names it as failure. This willingness to see beyond himself marks the beginning of empathy, a quality essential to true leadership. Judah's recognition of Tamar's integrity is equally significant. He does not describe her actions as clever or fortunate. He calls them righteous. This choice of language elevates her conduct beyond survival strategy into moral courage. Tamar acted not to exploit weakness, but to restore what had been unjustly withheld. Judah sees this clearly. He understands that her actions upheld the very values he neglected. This acknowledgement restores Tamar's dignity fully and publicly. She is no longer merely cleared of wrongdoing. She is honored. Her integrity is named by the very person whose authority once threatened her. In a society where a woman's reputation could determine her entire future, this recognition carries lasting weight. Judah's transformation also appears in what he does not do. After his confession, he does not attempt to reassert control. He does not punish Tamar for deception. He does not diminish her actions by reframing them as necessary evils. He accepts the truth without modification. His restraint speaks as loudly as his words. The text notes that Judah does not continue relations with Tamar. This detail, though brief, reveals respect. Tamar's actions were purposeful, not promiscuous. Judah honors that purpose by not reducing her to a continuing object of desire. He recognizes the boundary and keeps it. This restraint reflects a man who has learned to govern himself rather than others. Judah's character shift is also evident in how he now understands justice. Previously, he was quick to pronounce judgment when he believed Tamar had violated expectations. His command to have her burned shows how readily authority can become punitive when unexamined. After the truth is revealed, he does not attempt to soften his earlier severity with excuses. Instead, he allows his confession to stand as correction. He submits his authority to truth rather than bending truth to preserve authority. This willingness to be corrected is rare. It requires humility and courage, especially when exercised publicly. Judah does not seek a private resolution. His acknowledgment is spoken where his accusation was heard. This restores balance not only between him and Tamar, but within the community itself. Public wrong is met with public truth. The recognition of Tamar's integrity also reshapes Judah's understanding of God's work. Though the text does not record him speaking explicitly about divine involvement, his language of righteousness implies awareness of a moral order beyond human convenience. Tamar's actions align with that order. His own actions did not. By naming this, Judah implicitly acknowledges that justice operates even when human systems fail. This realization deepens Judah's spiritual maturity. He moves from acting as a guardian of tradition to becoming a participant in its deeper purpose. He begins to understand that customs like levirate responsibility exist not merely as rules, but as protections for the vulnerable and carriers of promise. Tamar's determination has forced him to confront the heart of those customs rather than their surface form. Judah's transformation does not erase his past. It reframes it. His earlier failures now serve as contrast, highlighting the significance of this moment. Growth in the biblical narrative often comes not through perfection, but through reckoning. Judah's willingness to reckon honestly with his wrongdoing prepares him for future moments where leadership will require sacrifice rather than avoidance. Tamar's integrity becomes a mirror in which Judah sees himself clearly. She acted with courage when abandoned. She waited with patience before acting. She planned carefully rather than reacting impulsively. She protected truth rather than weaponizing it. These qualities stand in quiet contrast to Judah's earlier pattern of delay and fear. In recognizing her righteousness, Judah implicitly commits himself to a different way of being. This shift also restores balance to Judah's household. The injustice that lingered unresolved is now named and corrected. Tamar is no longer an unresolved obligation. She is a woman whose faithfulness preserved lineage and justice simultaneously. Judah's recognition allows the household to move forward without the weight of hidden wrongdoing. The community surrounding them absorbs this transformation gradually. Authority exercised with humility reshapes expectations. Judah's confession becomes part of collective memory, a reference point for how power should respond when confronted with truth. His willingness to honor Tamar publicly challenges assumptions about who can embody righteousness. Judah's character change is not loud. It does not announce itself through grand gestures. It is revealed through acceptance, restraint, and clarity. These are quieter virtues, but they endure. They shape how he will later speak, act, and decide in moments yet to come. Tamar's integrity, once threatened by silence and accusation, now stands affirmed by transformation. Her courage has not only preserved lineage, it has reshaped a patriarch. This is no small outcome. In the biblical narrative, transformation of character often precedes fulfillment of promise. Judah's change prepares the ground for what will eventually emerge from his line. The recognition of Tamar's righteousness also reframes the entire story. What began as betrayal now becomes a turning point of restoration, not because wrongdoing is undone, but because it is acknowledged and answered with truth. Justice arrives not through punishment, but through recognition and change. Judah's growth continues beyond this moment, but its foundation is laid here. The man who once avoided responsibility now names it. The man who once protected himself at others' expense now honors the integrity of one he wronged. This shift does not happen by chance. It is born from confrontation with truth, accepted rather than resisted. Tamar's story remains central in this transformation. Her integrity is not passive. It is active, courageous, and discerning. Judah's recognition of that integrity elevates her role from victim to moral agent. She is not merely someone to whom things happened. She is someone who acted rightly under unjust conditions. This mutual recognition completes something essential. Judah sees Tamar clearly. Tamar is seen. Justice, long delayed, finds expression not through force, but through changed hearts. The narrative rests here in quiet strength, holding the image of a man transformed by truth and a woman whose integrity reshaped the course of a family. Nothing in this moment needs embellishment. The power lies in what has shifted beneath the surface. Judah is no longer the same man who sent Tamar away to wait. He is no longer the man who judged without listening. He has learned that righteousness may rise from unexpected places, and that authority must bow when confronted by truth lived faithfully. This recognition does not conclude the story. It steadies it. The path ahead is now grounded in honesty rather than fear. Tamar's integrity has been acknowledged, and Judah's character has been altered in a way that will echo far beyond this moment, carried quietly within the unfolding history that follows. The story of Tamar's courage does not end with Judah's confession. It extends quietly, almost imperceptibly, into the flow of history, carrying consequences far beyond her immediate circumstances. Her actions, calculated and brave, ensured not only personal justice, but the continuity of a lineage that would echo through generations. What could have been scandal and erasure instead became preservation and promise. The child Tamar bore was Perez, followed by Zerah. These sons were more than the fulfillment of Tamar's immediate desire to secure justice and continuity. They became the living link in a chain that would eventually lead to King David, and centuries later, to the ultimate fulfillment of the Messianic promise. In a society where lineage was everything, the survival of this family line was critical. Without Tamar's intervention, the line through Judah might have faltered entirely, leaving an enormous gap in the unfolding story of God's covenant people. It is remarkable to consider that the same society that almost condemned Tamar would come to rely on her courage for the survival of its most important promises. The boldness of a woman who dared to act when others faltered was the hinge upon which history turned. She did not rely on political maneuvering or societal approval. She relied on understanding the rules that governed both behavior and proof, and she used them to ensure that the family line, and with it the larger covenantal plan, would endure. The story emphasizes the intertwining of human action and divine purpose. Tamar's plan was born of necessity, yet it intersected seamlessly with the trajectory of God's plan. The birth of Perez, a direct result of her intervention, set the stage for the continuity of Judah's line, from which David would arise. Every step in that lineage carries the echoes of her calculated courage. Without her, the genealogy that appears in the later books of the Bible, connecting David to the promised Messiah, would have been disrupted. Tamar's bravery is thus inseparable from the preservation of history itself. It is also notable that the narrative presents this preservation without embellishing it as dramatic heroism in the conventional sense. Tamar does not wield armies or engage in open conflict. She does not speak grand proclamations to gather followers. Her heroism is subtle, tactical, and morally precise. She understands the stakes and acts in a manner that accomplishes her purpose without unnecessary exposure. The clever use of the staff, signet, and cord ensured undeniable proof, and her patience allowed the right moment to reveal the truth. In this quiet, measured way, the line of Judah continued unbroken. The scandal that could have defined Tamar's life instead becomes a story of triumph over social and familial constraints. While on the surface, her actions could have been interpreted as improper, in the narrative they are revealed to be righteous. Her courage was not only for her own survival or vindication. It was for the continuation of a promise that extended beyond her children, and into the generations that would follow. Through her boldness, the integrity of the lineage was safeguarded. The story also highlights a profound truth about the way justice and morality operate. Tamar's righteous actions were not contingent on approval. They were grounded in principle. In a society quick to judge and slow to protect, she acted decisively to uphold what was right, relying on both intelligence and courage. By doing so, she ensured that the Messianic line, a thread running through generations of Israel, was not broken by fear, neglect, or inaction. When we trace the genealogy later in the biblical text, the names of Perez and Zerah appear as essential markers of continuity. Perez, in particular, is noted as the ancestor through whom David is born, placing Tamar at the very root of the lineage that leads to the Messiah. It is an extraordinary testament to the power of calculated courage and moral clarity. Tamar's story becomes inseparable from the unfolding of divine purpose, showing that human action, even in constrained circumstances, can align with larger historical and spiritual designs. Tamar's legacy is also instructive in understanding the interplay of scandal and righteousness. The initial circumstances surrounding her pregnancy could have been misinterpreted or condemned by others. Society was ready to judge her harshly, but the narrative reveals that moral clarity and strategic action can redefine perception. Through integrity and patience, Tamar transformed what appeared to be scandal into a moment of restoration and preservation. In doing so, she not only secured her own place in history, but also guaranteed the continuity of a line that would carry enormous significance. Her actions also emphasize the unexpected ways in which God's purposes unfold. The text allows us to see that divine plans often work through ordinary human beings, and even through situations that seem scandalous or irregular. Tamar's bravery, though tactical and personally motivated, becomes part of a larger design. The preservation of Judah's line, the survival of the Messianic promise, and the eventual emergence of David all trace back to this single moment of calculated courage. This connection between Tamar's actions and the preservation of the Messianic line elevates the narrative from a story of family conflict to a story of providence, strategy, and righteousness. It reminds us that moral courage can operate quietly, without spectacle, and yet its consequences can resonate across generations. Her story is a bridge between personal integrity and historical significance, showing that one individual's steadfastness can change the course of history without public acclaim. The continuity of Judah's lineage through Perez becomes a living testament to Tamar's foresight. The risk she took, the social norms she challenged, and the patience with which she orchestrated her plan were all instrumental in maintaining the structure of promise. Every descendant that follows, every fulfillment of covenantal prophecy, is in part a testament to the courage of a woman who refused to be erased. Tamar's legacy is not only genealogical, but also moral. She challenges the assumption that power alone determines justice or the direction of history. Her intelligence, patience, and bravery show that moral clarity can redirect the course of events, even when the forces arrayed against a person are formidable. By acting with precision and maintaining her dignity, she not only preserves her own honor, but ensures that the Messianic promise continues uninterrupted. The story encourages reflection on the ways in which overlooked or marginalized individuals can become pivotal in shaping history. Tamar was a widow, a woman constrained by societal norms and family expectation. Yet her insight and courage allowed her to act in a manner that would resonate far beyond her immediate context. The birth of Perez is not only the preservation of Judah's line, it is an example of how righteousness and strategy, exercised under pressure, can influence the larger sweep of history. Even generations later, when the lineage of David is recounted, Tamar's presence in the genealogy reminds us that preservation often comes through unexpected channels. The narrative does not ignore her role. She is included in the sacred record, honored for the crucial part she played in sustaining the line through which God's promises would unfold. Her story bridges the personal and the cosmic, demonstrating that courage and justice in a constrained moment can shape events far beyond what anyone might anticipate. Her role also invites reflection on the ways God works through human agency. Tamar's calculated courage illustrates that providence often requires human insight, patience, and determination. Divine plans are not executed solely through overt miracles or grand gestures. They often operate through individuals who recognize the necessity of decisive, morally aligned action. Tamar's actions are a striking example of how personal bravery and ethical discernment can fulfill larger purposes without seeking recognition. The preservation of the Messianic line through Tamar's courage reinforces a central theme in the biblical narrative, that God's purposes can intersect with human decisions, even in morally complex or socially precarious circumstances. Tamar's story demonstrates that righteousness is not defined solely by convention or outward appearance. It is defined by faithfulness to justice and the courage to act when justice is denied. Tamar's actions also emphasize the subtle but profound impact one individual can have on history. Without her intervention, the continuity of Judah's line, and with it, the genealogy leading to David and eventually to the Messiah, might have been interrupted. Her careful planning, combined with moral clarity, ensured that what seemed at first like scandal became a moment of restoration and preservation. The story of Tamar reminds us that courage is often quiet, patient, and precise. It does not need public validation to be powerful. Her bravery was exercised in a moment of extreme vulnerability, constrained by social expectations and personal risk. Yet her action preserved not only her own dignity, but the trajectory of history itself. The children she bore became the conduit through which God's promises continued to unfold. Through Tamar, the narrative teaches that moral courage, strategic action, and steadfast integrity can overcome human failure and safeguard divine purpose. Her story underscores the interconnection between individual responsibility and historical consequence. The boldness of a single woman ensured that a lineage critical to the unfolding of God's covenant would endure, linking her courage directly to the preservation of the Messianic line. Her legacy is quietly monumental. The narrative preserves her name, her actions, and her wisdom. The boldness that once risked her reputation now secures a future that would shape nations and generations. Through her, history and promise converge, showing that even in moments that appear scandalous, righteousness exercised with courage can safeguard what is most sacred. Tamar's story thus invites reflection on the ways ordinary individuals, acting with insight and moral conviction, can influence the course of history. Her courage preserved not just family honor, but the line through which God's larger plan for Israel and the world would continue. It is a testament to the enduring power of righteousness and the quiet, transformative effect of principled action. From the moment Tamar gave birth to Perez and Zerah, the line of Judah began to carry forward a legacy both remarkable and essential. Perez, the firstborn, became the direct link through which the family line would continue, carrying forward not only Judah's name but also the promise of future generations. Zerah, his brother, also contributed to the lineage, though it is Perez who is most prominently remembered in the genealogical record. The careful preservation of this line is a testament to Tamar's foresight and courage. Perez's descendants grew and multiplied, forming the foundation of a family that would become increasingly significant in Israel's history. Generations passed, each child born into a world shaped by the choices of those who came before, each family member inheriting not only the name but the moral and social responsibilities of their ancestors. Tamar's boldness ensured that these generations would have a beginning, that the line of Judah would remain unbroken, and that the covenantal promises tied to Judah's family would remain intact. Among Perez's descendants, one line stands out as particularly pivotal, the line leading to King David. David's ancestry traces directly through Perez, making Tamar not only a critical figure in Judah's household, but also a vital presence in the history of Israel's monarchy. Every act of courage, every calculated decision she made, reverberated down through these generations, culminating in David's rise to kingship. Her story, though situated in a single moment of personal and family crisis, set the stage for leadership, legacy, and divine purpose. King David himself became a central figure in Israel, renowned for his courage, faith, and leadership. Yet even his story is inseparable from the actions of Tamar many generations before. Through her, the continuity of the line was assured. Through her, the promise that Judah's family would produce leaders, including the king who would establish Jerusalem as the spiritual and political heart of Israel, was fulfilled. Tamar's influence, though indirect, shaped the course of history in profound ways. The lineage continues beyond David, eventually leading to the fulfillment of the Messianic promise. Each generation carries echoes of Tamar's courage and wisdom. Her presence in the genealogy, recorded with precision, is both acknowledgment and honor. A woman whose actions preserved a line destined for greatness, and whose moral clarity ensured that the narrative of Israel could unfold as intended. Tamar's legacy, traced through Perez, Zerah, and all the generations to David and beyond, reminds us that the impact of righteous courage is not confined to a single moment. It flows quietly, persistently, through history, shaping the lives and destinies of countless others. In every descendant, from the earliest sons of Judah to the king who ruled Israel and the generations that followed, the imprint of her bravery and foresight remains undeniable. The story of Tamar and Judah carries lessons that stretch far beyond the immediate events of family, duty, and lineage. At its heart, it demonstrates how God's purposes often unfold through unconventional means, through moments that might appear scandalous, confusing, or morally ambiguous to human eyes. The birth of Perez and Zerah, and the preservation of Judah's line, did not come through straightforward obedience or societal expectation. It came through the courage, strategy, and moral clarity of a woman acting under extraordinary pressure. This pattern recurs throughout the biblical narrative. God's plans frequently work through human decisions, even those made under duress or in complex circumstances. Tamar's story is not a cautionary tale about scandal. It is a vivid illustration of providence at work, revealing that God's purposes are not limited by human assumptions about propriety or hierarchy. The very events that could have been judged as shameful became instruments of preservation and blessing. The unconventional means in Tamar's story challenge our understanding of how divine action intersects with human initiative. God did not bypass Tamar's decision or supernaturally intervene to preserve the lineage. Instead, the outcome depended on her discernment, bravery, and patience. Through her, what could have been loss or disgrace was transformed into life, continuity, and promise. This reminds us that God's work often comes through ordinary people responding faithfully to difficult circumstances, even when their actions do not fit neatly into conventional expectations. There is also a broader moral and theological lesson here. Human judgment is limited. Social norms and immediate perceptions of scandal do not define righteousness. Tamar's clever plan might have seemed deceptive or improper to her community, but in the moral framework of the narrative, it is an act of justice and courage. Through her story, the text encourages reflection on the distinction between outward appearances and divine purpose. What humans might condemn, God can use to accomplish enduring outcomes. Tamar's role illustrates that God can work through the margins, through those who are vulnerable or overlooked. Her social position, a widow, a woman dependent on the fulfillment of Levirate law, could have made her powerless. Yet it is precisely through her marginality, through the constraints and risks she faced, that God's plan advanced. Her story is a testament to the ways in which divine purpose often emerges through those whom the world might underestimate, undervalue, or even condemn. The unfolding of the Messianic line through moments that appear irregular or controversial also demonstrates the creative and sometimes paradoxical nature of divine providence. God's purposes do not always follow the predictable or socially sanctioned paths. They often work through human ingenuity, moral courage, and resilience, even when circumstances seem adverse or morally complex. Tamar's decisive action preserves not only her dignity and family legacy, but also the unfolding of covenantal promises that span generations. This narrative invites reflection on how God's presence can be discerned in unexpected places. The apparent scandal surrounding Tamar's pregnancy was not a barrier to divine purpose. It became the very conduit through which the Messianic line was preserved. Events that might provoke judgment, fear, or misunderstanding can, under divine guidance, become instruments of blessing and fulfillment. Tamar's story embodies this principle, showing that human limitations and societal expectations cannot constrain God's work. In considering Tamar's story, we see that God's plan often requires human collaboration in morally complex situations. The preservation of Judah's line was not automatic. It relied on Tamar's insight, courage, and decisiveness. God works through human initiative, shaping outcomes through choices that reflect integrity and perseverance, even when those choices might appear unconventional or risky. The broader implication of this story extends to how we understand justice, agency, and providence. Tamar's actions remind us that righteous action can occur in difficult and unexpected circumstances, that God's purposes can be fulfilled through the seemingly unconventional means challenges human preconceptions about how the world should operate and how moral action is recognized. It highlights the dynamic interplay between human responsibility and divine orchestration, showing that courage, discernment, and ethical commitment are crucial in the unfolding of history. Ultimately, Tamar's story affirms that God's plans are not limited by social expectations, scandal, or human hesitation. Divine providence can operate through the marginalized, the overlooked, and even through situations that seem morally ambiguous. The birth of Perez and Zerah, the continuity of Judah's line, and the eventual emergence of David and the Messianic line all under the profound truth that God's work often unfolds through human courage, ingenuity, and steadfastness in the face of societal and personal obstacles. Tamar's narrative encourages reflection on the ways in which courage, integrity, and decisive action intersect with divine purpose. The seemingly scandalous moment is transformed into a channel for blessing and continuity. It challenges the listener to consider that the extraordinary often emerges from the ordinary, that providence can operate through the unexpected, and that God's work may require human initiative in ways that defy conventional understanding while fulfilling eternal purposes. Tamar's story leaves a legacy that resonates far beyond the immediate events of her life. Her character emerges in the narrative with clarity and depth, revealing qualities that mark her as one of the most remarkable figures in the biblical record. She is cunning in the sense that she perceives opportunity where others see only constraint. She understands the limitations imposed by society, by family, and by circumstance, and she navigates them with intelligence and precision. Every step she takes, from her calculated disguise to the careful safeguarding of the staff, signet, and cord, reflects a mind attuned to strategy, risk, and the need for undeniable proof. Yet Tamar's cunning is never self-serving in the narrowest sense. It is inseparable from her commitment to justice, to preserving what is rightfully hers, and to securing the continuity of the family line. Her ingenuity is exercised in service of principle. When Judah fails to fulfill his obligation to provide Shelah as her lever, Tamar does not respond with anger alone. She responds with careful thought, ensuring that her actions are both morally grounded and effective. Her intelligence is a tool wielded for the protection of life, lineage, and integrity. Tenacity is another defining aspect of her character. Tamar's life is constrained by loss and vulnerability. She is widowed twice, left in a society where women's security is closely tied to male relatives, where the failure of a patriarch to act can mean destitution and social ostracism. Yet she does not accept a passive fate. She waits patiently, plans meticulously, and acts decisively when the moment arrives. Her persistence is measured and disciplined. It is not impulsive or reckless. Through her steadfastness, she asserts control over her destiny in a context that offers her few options. Fierce commitment to justice underpins every action Tamar takes. Her boldness in confronting Judah, presenting the evidence of the staff, signet, and cord, demonstrates a moral clarity that is both rare and powerful. She does not seek vengeance or humiliation. She seeks recognition of what is right, restoration of her dignity, and the fulfillment of obligations denied to her. In doing so, she challenges societal assumptions about power, authority, and morality. Her courage transforms what could have been scandal into a vehicle for justice and preservation. Tamar's legacy is multifaceted. On one level, she preserves the lineage of Judah, ensuring that the line through Perez and Zerah continues unbroken, ultimately connecting to King David and the Messianic promise. On another level, she models moral courage in a context where women's agency was often constrained. She demonstrates that intelligence, patience, and daring can intersect to achieve justice in a world that does not always recognize or reward such qualities. Her actions redefine heroism in the biblical context. Heroism is not solely about martial prowess, prophetic declarations, or public leadership. Tamar embodies a quieter, strategic, and morally grounded form of courage. She exercises agency under constraint, acts decisively when injustice threatens, and aligns her personal objectives with broader ethical imperatives. In doing so, she ensures that history, providence, and justice converge through her choices. Even centuries later, Tamar's influence can be traced in the genealogy of Israel. She occupies a place of honor in a lineage often dominated by male figures. Her courage, intelligence, and moral vision are recognized through the preservation of the family line, through the continuity of the covenantal promise, and through the eventual emergence of leaders like David. In this way, her story reminds us that influence is not always measured by visibility or power alone, but by the enduring consequences of righteous action. Tamar's enduring legacy challenges readers and listeners to reconsider assumptions about agency, morality, and courage. She demonstrates that cleverness, when guided by ethical commitment, becomes a force for justice. She shows that patience and persistence, exercised with insight and resolve, can overcome societal and familial obstacles. She reveals that moral courage often requires risk, strategy, and timing, and that the most significant acts of righteousness may occur in quiet, seemingly marginal ways. Through Tamar, the narrative teaches that righteousness can manifest in bold and unconventional forms. Her life encourages reflection on the ways courage, intelligence, and ethical steadfastness can shape outcomes far beyond immediate circumstances. She is a figure whose cunning is matched by tenacity, whose daring is tempered by principle, and whose actions ensure that justice, life, and lineage are preserved. Tamar's story remains a testament to the transformative power of agency exercised wisely, courage applied with purpose, and justice pursued relentlessly. Her character invites admiration not only for her achievements but for the enduring principles she embodies: clarity of purpose, courage under constraint, and unwavering commitment to what is right. In preserving both her own dignity and the continuity of the Messianic line, Tamar leaves a legacy that resonates through history, illuminating the profound impact that one individual, acting with intelligence and moral courage, can have on generations to come. Tamar's story invites us to rethink what heroism looks like, especially in ancient narratives where the measures of courage and valor are often defined by visible strength, public authority, or battlefield deeds. In many traditional stories, heroes are warriors, leaders, or prophets whose actions dominate the public stage. Yet Tamar's heroism is quiet, strategic, and morally precise. It does not rely on force or fame, but on intelligence, patience, and ethical determination. In her, we see a form of heroism that operates through insight, courage under constraint, and the deliberate pursuit of justice, even when the risks are personal and the world may misjudge her. She teaches that true heroism often requires navigating complex social and familial structures with wisdom and foresight. Tamar's situation placed her in a position of vulnerability. She was a widow twice over, a woman constrained by societal norms, dependent on the promises of others, and at risk of social ostracism. Many would have accepted the limits imposed upon them, hoping to endure or wait for fate to intervene. Tamar did not. She observed, assessed, and acted with purpose, turning what appeared to be a powerless position into a moment of decisive agency. Her heroism lies in her ability to act where others might remain passive, in her recognition that courage sometimes takes the form of strategy rather than confrontation. Her story also challenges assumptions about morality and scandal. Tamar's actions could have been misinterpreted as improper, yet they were guided by integrity, justice, and the preservation of life and lineage. The measure of heroism, in this context, is not conformity to appearances, but the courage to pursue what is right when the structures around you fail to protect it. Heroism, Tamar shows, is about moral vision and the willingness to take calculated risks for the greater good, even when personal cost is high. By acting decisively to secure her rights and ensure the continuity of Judah's line, Tamar embodies a form of courage that is both ethical and transformative. She models heroism as the alignment of intellect, moral clarity, and deliberate action. Her bravery preserves the integrity of the family, protects the vulnerable, and ensures that the lineage through which God's promises would unfold remains intact. In this way, her heroism is measured not by spectacle, but by consequence, demonstrating that quiet, principled action can have profound, far-reaching effects. The ancient narratives, often dominated by male figures, gain depth when we recognize Tamar's form of heroism. She represents those whose courage operates in the shadows of societal structures, whose impact is not measured by armies or political power, but by foresight, moral courage, and the ability to navigate complex situations with integrity. Tamar's legacy challenges listeners to reconsider who can be a hero, to expand the definition beyond conventional notions of strength and authority, and to appreciate the power of intelligence and ethical action. Tamar's example also reminds us that heroism can be transformative for those who wield it and for the generations that follow. Her actions directly influence the course of Judah's family, preserve the Messianic line, and shape the future of Israel. The results of her courage ripple through time, demonstrating that heroism is not merely an individual accolade, but a force with enduring impact. The quiet precision of her decisions, the moral clarity guiding her actions, and the wisdom to act decisively when circumstances demand it all define a heroic legacy that endures far beyond her immediate context. In reconsidering Tamar as a hero, we are invited to reflect on how courage manifests in situations of constraint and vulnerability. Heroism may not always be loud or public. It may not always fit the expectations of society, yet it can shape destinies, preserve justice, and leave a mark on history. Tamar's story teaches that the courage to act rightly in morally complex situations, even when unnoticed or misunderstood, is a form of heroism as powerful as any traditional narrative of battle or conquest. Ultimately, Tamar challenges listeners to broaden their understanding of what it means to be heroic. She demonstrates that moral clarity, strategic intelligence, and unwavering commitment to justice constitute courage in ways that ancient narratives often overlook. By recognizing her bravery, we expand our conception of heroism to include the subtle, the strategic, and the morally courageous, showing that the most enduring acts of heroism are often those that safeguard life, justice, and the continuity of promise, even in the face of social risk and personal vulnerability. Tamar's story leaves us reflecting not only on her courage, but on the countless figures throughout history whose significance may be overlooked or underappreciated. Her actions demonstrate that influence, heroism, and moral impact are not always tied to status, visibility, or power. They remind us to look beyond the obvious, to recognize the quiet, strategic, and principled interventions that shape families, communities, and history itself. She prompts us to ask questions about who else in these ancient narratives deserves our attention, whose voices and deeds may have been underestimated, and whose courage has quietly shaped the course of events. In the biblical record, many figures exist in the shadows of larger, more publicized narratives. Tamar shows us that heroism often emerges from constraint, marginality, and social vulnerability. She exemplifies how individuals, especially women or those with little societal power, can exercise intelligence, foresight, and moral courage to achieve extraordinary results. Reflecting on her story invites us to consider other figures whose contributions may be hidden behind social structures, cultural expectations, or the passage of time. How many other individuals acted decisively to preserve life, family, or faithfulness, yet their stories are only glimpsed briefly or recorded with minimal attention? The call to examine overlooked figures extends beyond biblical texts. Across history, culture, and society, countless people have acted with bravery, wisdom, or ingenuity without public recognition. They may have corrected injustices, safeguarded lineages, preserved traditions, or ensured the survival of communities. Tamar's narrative encourages us to seek out these stories, to learn from them, and to honor the lessons they provide about courage under constraint, ethical decision-making, and strategic insight. Her story challenges the tendency to equate heroism only with visibility, power, or outward spectacle. In contemplating other overlooked figures, we might consider those who acted quietly but decisively, individuals whose ethical clarity allowed them to correct wrongs or restore balance where institutions, families, or societies had failed. Like Tamar, their heroism may not have been recognized immediately or widely, yet their actions shaped outcomes in profound ways. These figures invite us to broaden our understanding of moral courage and to appreciate the subtle, transformative influence that principled human action can have on the unfolding of history. Tamar's story also encourages curiosity about the hidden networks of influence throughout the biblical narrative. Who else contributed to the preservation of life, lineage, or faithfulness in ways that were not immediately visible? Her example inspires listeners to pay attention to those who operate on the margins, who take strategic risks, and who act from a place of justice and moral clarity. By recognizing Tamar's courage, we are invited to recognize patterns of human initiative that work quietly yet decisively in alignment with divine purpose. This reflection naturally leads to a question for the audience. What other overlooked figures deserve our attention? Who are the women, the widows, the marginalized, or the quiet strategists whose actions carried profound consequences, yet whose stories are often abbreviated or barely mentioned? Tamar reminds us that these individuals exist and that their influence, though sometimes hidden, is no less powerful or essential. By asking this question, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of history, of moral courage, and of the unexpected ways in which heroism manifests. The question is also an invitation to actively engage with the narratives we encounter. It challenges listeners to read attentively, to reflect critically, and to consider whose actions matter even when society does not fully recognize them. Tamar's story teaches that significance is not determined by immediate recognition, but by the consequences of principled action and the preservation of justice, life, and promise. Her example models how courage exercised under constraint can leave a legacy that reverberates through generations. By contemplating overlooked figures, we expand our understanding of the kinds of impact an individual can have. Tamar's courage, cunning, and moral integrity ensured the continuation of Judah's line and the unfolding of the Messianic promise. Similar acts of quiet heroism, whether in ancient texts, historical events, or contemporary life, demonstrate that moral courage and strategic insight often occur where it is least expected but most necessary. Recognizing these figures deepens our appreciation of history and human resilience. Ultimately, Tamar's story becomes a lens through which we view all hidden acts of valor and integrity. It encourages us to look for stories of quiet influence, moral clarity, and strategic courage that shape outcomes in ways that are not always celebrated but are profoundly consequential. The invitation to consider other overlooked figures is not merely rhetorical. It is a challenge to the audience to engage with the past, to seek out these hidden stories, and to recognize the extraordinary within the ordinary. Tamar's legacy, in this way, becomes a guide for discovering heroism wherever it quietly manifests. Her life reminds us that heroism is not always public, not always lauded, and not always immediately acknowledged. Sometimes it is strategic, moral, and transformative in ways that only reveal themselves over time. By reflecting on her story and asking who else deserves recognition, we honor those who act with intelligence, courage, and ethical steadfastness. Tamar's enduring influence is a call to recognize the hidden architects of history and to celebrate the subtle, yet profound, ways in which justice and righteousness are preserved through human action. May the Lord bless you and keep you as you rest tonight, guarding your heart and mind with His peace. May His presence surround you, His promises comfort you, and His love renew your spirit for the day ahead. Sleep in His faithfulness, and awaken refreshed to walk in His light.